Hello everybody, and welcome to this very special series where we're looking at Pluto and his transit through each of the whole sign houses. I'm so excited to be sharing this series with you. If you like this video, then please like, share and subscribe to my channel. And if you would like to study astrology further and in depth with me and even gain a certification if you desire, then please consider joining my classes at the Royal Stars Academy. The link is in the description below. Now, on the 23rd of March 2023, which is ahead in time at the moment that I am recording this, but maybe you're watching this after that has occurred, Pluto will make his first foray into the sign of Aquarius since he was last there in 1781. Now, it's been a long time between Aquarian transits for the little planet Pluto. As such, I thought it would be a good time to talk about Pluto changing signs and what it will mean for everyone depending on your rising sign in whole sign astrology. So this video series will be applicable whenever Pluto changes signs in the future. But as I'm recording this in the run-up to Pluto in Aquarius in 2023, it's very pertinent to us now and will be pertinent to us for almost 20 years as Pluto moves through this sign, the sign of Aquarius. Now, Pluto is an unusual planet in astrology and also in astronomy. So for a start, he has an elliptical orbit, which means that he spends different lengths of time in each zodiac sign. I'm going to talk about the lengths of time a little later in this introduction. But check out this diagram of Pluto's orbit and you'll see how different it is to all the other planets in the solar system. So let's look a little more now at the astronomy of Pluto. So although astronomically it's classified as a dwarf planet, in astrology we all know that Pluto packs a massive punch, but more on the astrology of Pluto a little bit later. However, just because an object is small and because an object is far away doesn't mean that it's not powerful. Pluto is atomically powerful, and anyone who's familiar with astrology will know that he is really punchy. So our moon, Luna, it weighs 6 times as much as Pluto does. It's more hefty in that sense. First little tidbit of information astronomically about Pluto. We realize that he is a small object at the far reaches of the solar system. It's quite amazing that we know of his existence, actually, especially as our moon is more weighty than he is. It takes 248 years for Pluto to do a complete cycle around the sun. And Pluto's average surface temperature is a very chilly minus 230 degrees Celsius. It actually feels like that today where I am as I'm recording this in the middle of winter. Minus 280 degrees Celsius is actually minus 382 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can imagine, wherever you are in the world, how cold that actually is. Not surprising considering Pluto is at the far reaches of the solar system, a long way from the sun. Now, Pluto has 5 known moons and is classified, as I said, as one of the dwarf planets, along with Eris, who is the largest of the dwarf planets, but also Haumea, Makemake, and Ceres. They're the other dwarf planets that we know of. Now, Pluto was discovered in 1930 by the American astronomer Clyde Tombaugh, and in fact, there's we'll talk about this in a minute, but there is a glacier on Pluto that they've named after the man who discovered Pluto. And Pluto resides in the Kuiper belt at the very edge of the solar system beyond Neptune. And the name Pluto was actually suggested by a young 11-year-old child named Venetia Burney, and she was a mythology lover. So contrary to popular opinion, she didn't name Pluto after the Disney dog. In fact, the naming of the Disney dog came not long after the naming of the tiny planet, who was named after Pluto in ancient mythology. And we're going to talk about that very soon. One thing that fascinates me about Pluto is that when the shuttle, the New Horizons shuttle, went past Pluto in 2015, it took some photos as it passed by this tiny planet. Once again, check out these photos. Now you'll notice this heart-shaped colouring on the side of Pluto. I find this fascinating. Well, this is a glacier named after the discoverer of Pluto, and it's a glacier of frozen nitrogen. Now, due to the heat or the temperature below the surface of this glacier, this heart shape slowly churns over the course of millennia. So it changes over the course of millennia. And scientists believe that the glacial churning is ice continually refreshing itself, which is why the glacier actually shows no signs of craterial impact. You know, like there's moons, Pluto has 5 moons, and they all show evidence of having been hit by, having craters because they've been hit by asteroids and things like that. This glacier has no evidence of that because of this churning that refreshes it. Keep that in mind. Keep the word refreshing in mind because it correlates as above, so below to how we understand Pluto in astrology. And keep in mind the significance of our first human beholding of Pluto, which revealed this beating heart. It refreshes, and you know, it expands and contracts and expands and contracts as part of its refreshing process. It ebbs and flows with the cycles of the warming and cooling that Pluto experiences as it travels around the sun. Because sometimes Pluto is closer to the sun than at other times, and that affects its speed as it travels through the zodiac signs. So, in essence, Pluto's temperature ebbs and flows, which causes this heart to ebb and flow as it refreshes its cycle. It's the beating heart of Pluto. This is very important to remember when we come to talk about the astrology shortly. Now, scientists also believe that when Pluto was a very young planet, it probably contained a H2O ocean, a water ocean. In fact, it's also likely to have some sort of water in an oceanic form still in existence underneath its icy crust. But of course, we haven't landed on Pluto to determine that. We're only surmising. So it's a planet of mysteries astronomically that are slowly but surely being revealed to all of humanity. And I find all these discoveries to be very exciting, especially when we see the world through the lens of the as above, so below Hermetic principle. What about the mythology of Pluto? Well, Pluto was in mythology the son of the Titan god Saturn, and he was one of 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and 2 of the brothers and the 3 sisters were eaten by Saturn or Kronos, and these gods that were eaten, these brothers and sisters that were eaten, were known collectively as the Olympians, and they were vomited up when they were rescued by their heroic brother and king of the gods, Jupiter. And I talked about the mythology of Jupiter in my series on Jupiter transiting through all the houses, if you want to check that out. But Pluto is one of these 3 supreme male deities of the ancient Olympian Parthenon, along with his siblings, Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, they were the masculine ones, and his sisters, Juno, Vesta, and Ceres, the 6 of them. So Pluto was the mysterious Roman god of the dead and the lord of the underworld. And this is why I've got this little display happening here. We've got a face mask from the Day of the Dead here, some dead dried flowers. These are things that Pluto correlates to. We also have a succulent. Pluto rules succulents and cactuses. We're going to talk more about what Pluto rules shortly, but I just thought I'd explain why I've got that little display beside me to symbolize Pluto. He was the lord of the dead, the lord of the underworld. He was also known as the bringer of wealth, or the god of great wealth. So the name Pluto means the unseen one, and this is why Pluto was given this name, because he had been unseen and now was seen. So very pertinent to the astronomical naming of Pluto, which I've just described. Pluto lived in underground, gloomy places, and he seemed to, as a god, have very little interest in the world of men. But similarly, he also had very little interest in the affairs of the gods as well, and he tended to avoid associating with men and gods. He was very much the loner god. He was a figure in ancient mythology of enormous dread, terrible might, like very powerful god. And he was a god who dispensed luck and controlled the fates of mortals. Pretty full on, hey? He ruled the regions within the earth and everything that came out of inner earth, so to speak, the minerals, the precious stones. And this is part of the reason he was known as the god of great wealth. Pluto was the Roman counterpart to the Greek god Hades. And Hades was the Greek god who ruled the underworld in Greek mythology. Pluto rode a chariot and he carried a staff in his hand, and he was often accompanied by Cerberus, a three-headed dog that served as both his pet and a guardian of the underworld. And if you've watched movies and so forth about mythology, you probably will have seen that three-headed dog represented. I think it's in the film Clash of the Titans, if I'm not mistaken, old film from the 60s or 70s. But one of Pluto's most famous myths centered around his abduction of the young woman Persephone and the grief of her mother, the goddess Ceres. So Pluto, this loner god living in the gloomy underworld, rarely interacting with gods or mankind, was pitied by the goddess Venus. So she told her son Cupid to fire one of his love arrows at Pluto so that he would fall in love with the next woman that he saw. And that woman was Persephone. She was playing in the fields at Nysa. So his passion and his desire was uncontrollable because of this arrow that had been fired at him by Cupid. Keep that passion and desire element in mind. It's very pertinent to the astrology of Pluto, actually. So in his passion, in his desire, he abducted Persephone in his chariot. And following her abduction, her mother, Ceres, searched high and low for her missing daughter in a panic and grief. And her search was fruitless because nobody knew where she'd gone. Persephone was in the underworld, and she became there the unwilling bride of Pluto. People in some mythologies refer to it as the rape of Persephone. But in essence, she became the queen of the underworld. Pluto, on the other hand, he refused to acknowledge that he had kidnapped her. He refused to even let it be known where she was, so she was being held in secret. I mean, one of these horrible experiences, and it brings to mind all these dreadful experiences that we sometimes hear in the news about abductions and kidnapping, and people have been held prisoner for years and so on, and what grief that must cause the parents and family involved. Ceres, similarly, grew very thin. She grew pale and emaciated due to her great grief, her sorrow, and her constant searching for her daughter. Now, Ceres was the goddess of agriculture and fertility. And because of her sorrow and her emaciated appearance, it correlated to what was happening on the earth, and the earth suffered. The land and the animals became barren and infertile. Agriculture suffered because the goddess governing those things was not in her power. She was grieving. Now, Mercury, the messenger god, informed Jupiter of Persephone's whereabouts. He happened to have heard on the grapevine where she was, and he let Jupiter know where she was. And Jupiter ordered his brother Pluto, because Jupiter was the king of the gods and everybody sort of bowed down to Jupiter. He was the rescuer, the hero who saved them from their father. So Jupiter ordered that Pluto release Persephone at once, and he did that because he wanted to restore the fertility to the earth. And of course, Pluto had to comply to avoid the wrath of his brother, the king of the gods, Jupiter. So having no choice, Pluto returned Persephone, but on the proviso that she had not eaten anything while she was in the underworld, because if she had, she would therefore belong to the underworld if she'd ingested anything that came from the underworld. And it was discovered that Persephone had consumed a few pomegranate seeds while she was in the underworld. And so Pluto demanded that Persephone should remain with him for a portion of each year. Jupiter agreed to this demand because she had consumed fruit from the underworld, pomegranate seeds. And so he ordered that Persephone would spend half her time with Ceres on the earth and half her time with Pluto in the underworld. And now we see this represented in the seasons. You know, Persephone leaves the earth in early autumn, and we start to, things die down, things get cold and wintry, the earth is infertile and frozen and barren, and she returns back to Ceres. Persephone comes back to her mother in early spring. And this is obviously when things begin to bloom, the days get warmer, and we find that things start to fruit and flourish again. So during her absence, Ceres is grieving and the world grows barren. And when she returns, the world flourishes back to life. And you notice the symbology here? Death and rebirth, very much associated with the essence of Pluto. That he rules death, but he is also associated with the rebirthing phase due to this mythology. So due to Pluto's mysterious nature and his association with death, he was not a central figure in the worship of Roman state religion. So there were no state festivals, no temples, no dedications in his honor. He had little to do with the world of men, and men tended, the world of mankind tended to avoid him as well. So let's talk about Pluto in astrology. This gets really interesting and exciting. Pluto is the modern ruler of the sign of Scorpio, and like the mysterious water sign, they do share many similarities in the things that they govern. Now, Pluto is really the planet that defines the 20th century, the century that's just been, because he entered our collective consciousness. In other words, he was discovered and we became aware of him in 1930. Now, obviously, he had existed for millennia before that, but we only found out about Pluto as human beings on the Earth in 1930. And so Pluto has connections to everything that manifested around that time, sort of within 20 years either side of 1930. Now, this includes atomic energy, nuclear power, plutonium, weapons of mass destruction. Those heavy-duty things that I've just mentioned, I mean, imagine the permanent winter that would be visited upon the Earth in the event of a nuclear holocaust. Persephone might never return if those things were unleashed on the Earth. Pluto has governance of those things. Let's hope they're never unleashed, because we rather enjoy having Persephone return in the springtime. So the Pluto in Leo generation, I'll talk about the generations of Pluto in just a second. The Pluto in Leo generation were the first full generation born into the conscious awareness of Pluto. So Pluto was halfway through the sign of Cancer when he was discovered. And so by the time the Pluto and Leo generation, the baby boomers, were being born, everybody knew about Pluto. He was in full conscious awareness. So the Pluto and Leo generation, all of them, everyone born with Pluto and Leo, hold this awareness and their consciousness and their human state of Pluto and his amazing power, amazing and terrifying power. And it's really interesting to me to observe what's going on in the world now in 2022 as I'm recording this, that it's the Pluto and Leo generation that are holding the power of Pluto in their hands. And the eventuality of whether we go into a nuclear winter or not is in the hands of the leaders of our day and age, which, for better or worse, are the Pluto in Leo generation. So Pluto is the planet that defines the generations. Let me go through the examples. And as I do this, you'll see how Pluto spends different lengths of time in different signs because he has this very strange orbit. So Pluto was in Leo from 1937 to 1956. He was 19 years in the sign of Leo. This is the baby boomer generation. Pluto was in Virgo from 1956 to 1971. 15 years. You can see it's getting less. 15 years in the sign of Virgo. This is the Generation X or the group 1, if you like, of Generation X. And then Pluto was in Libra from 1971 to 1983, 13 years in this sign. It's getting less again. This was group 2 of Generation X, because some people in this generation classify themselves as Generation X. But I have read that this generation is also known as the Xennials, Xennials, the Xennials. Then Pluto was in Scorpio from 1983 to 1985. Only 12 years in the sign of Scorpio. This is where Pluto spends his shortest length of time, in the sign of Scorpio. And this is Gen Y, the millennials, Pluto and Scorpio generation. I'm excited by this generation because it's this generation, Gen Y, the millennials, and because they are born with Pluto in Scorpio, the sign that Pluto rules, they are waking the world up to the power of astrology and the occult again. And they're very intense. They're a very intense generation. We'll find out why, because as we go along here, because Pluto is a very intense planet, powerful people, powerful generation, powerful planet in a very powerful position. So this generation are going to be the movers and shakers. They're going to be the ones who change the world and hopefully regenerate the world and bring the springtime back to the world from what has been stolen, which I believe has been stolen over the last 80 years or so. And we're getting up to sort of 90 to 100 years since Pluto has been discovered. So very interesting generation to keep an eye on. The Pluto in Sagittarius generation goes from 1995 to 2008. Pluto was 13 years in this sign. This is Generation Z. Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto spent 15 years in the sign of Capricorn from 2008 to 2023. Now we're coming to the conclusion of the Pluto in Capricorn years, and it has been said that this is known as Generation Alpha, this particular generation. Then from 2023 to 2043, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius. And this is going to be 20 years in this sign. A new generation will begin in 2023. Pluto will then be in Pisces from 2043 to 2068, 25 years in the sign of Pisces. He's going to be 29 years in the sign of Aries, which is going to last from 2068 to 2097. Then he's going to move into Taurus for 33 years. And you know, Taurus sits opposite Scorpio. This is where Pluto spends the longest duration, 33 years in the sign of Taurus, from 2097 to 2130. 2130 is when that period, that generation, is going to end. And then we will have Pluto in Gemini. That's going to be for 30 years. Now the length of time in a sign starts to decrease. This is going to last from 2130 to 2160, 30 years in the sign of Gemini. And then Pluto in Cancer from 2160 to 2186, 26 years in the sign of Cancer. And then we're back to Pluto in Leo all over again. So that's how Pluto governs the generations. It's a very generational planet, and we define our generational influences by the length of time Pluto spends in each sign. So in any singular lifetime, Pluto is only ever going to transit 3 to at most 6 houses, because he just takes that long to move through a sign. So therefore, the transits of Pluto that you will have in your lifetime are extremely important to your life. You incarnated to experience those particular transits for the growth of your soul, for better or worse. Now, not everyone's going to experience a transit of Pluto to the powerful first house, but those that do will experience life-changing results. Not everyone's going to experience a transit of Pluto to the 10th house, but those that do are likely to go through a powerful change in how they are perceived by the world at large. Not everyone's going to go through a Pluto transit to the 3rd house, but those that do will experience extraordinary up-leveling of intuition and communicative skills. So wherever Pluto is making his transits over the course of your lifetime, is just what your soul needs for your growth. So Pluto is the expression, this is what Pluto rules in astrology, what he's all about in astrology. He is power and powerful people, control, hidden realms, anything that's taboo, anything that brings a crisis into our life. Nuclear holocaust, big time crisis, that's Pluto. You know, any type of crisis is a Pluto event. Pluto also has to do with purging in our life, releasing, letting go of, excreting and getting rid of things. That's Pluto. Pluto also rules renewal. Hence we have that mythology of the renewal of the springtime after the winter. Death and rebirth, renewal, transformation. Big mythology of change, you know, winter to spring, that transformation from cold to warmth, from death to life. Pluto rules those things. Anything in life that brings a transformation is from Pluto, or considered a Plutonian experience. Pluto rules rebirthing, regeneration, renovation. He brings hidden things that are secret, out into the light. Remember his name and the meaning of his name, that which is hidden. And then he's been discovered in our lifetime. We have brung the hidden things into the light. Pluto rules, or has to do with having incredible ambition, second to none. People with Pluto strong in their chart, on the ascendant or conjunct with the sun or the moon, maybe on the midheaven as well. People who have Pluto strong in their chart are the masters of ambition, the masters of hustle. They get things done. They make it happen, because that's what Pluto's all about. In a sense, Pluto is a bit like Jupiter. Jupiter amplifies in astrology whatever it connects with, or wherever it sits in a horoscope. Jupiter makes it bigger, larger, bigger than life. However, rather than amplification, Pluto, because amplification is Jupiter, Pluto tends to give tremendous power to wherever it sits in life. For example, Pluto in a conjunction with Venus gives powerful desires and powerful passions. Just like in the mythology, when Venus told her son to fire the arrow at Pluto, what did it give to Pluto? Powerful desire, powerful passion. Same deal in astrology. When Venus and Pluto are sitting together in the chart, powerful desire, powerful passion present in your life. When Pluto sits with the sun, you get a powerful ego, a powerful sense of identity. Wherever Pluto sits, whatever planet it sits with, whatever house it's in, it's going to empower that realm of our life. So there's tremendous intensity wherever Pluto sits in a chart. Pluto strong people can actually be very intense people, because Pluto's an intense planet, and they can often be very polarizing. Why is that? Well, we are at one end of the solar system, sitting up near the sun, getting nice and warm. Where's the other end? The polaric opposite, Pluto, right out in the Kuiper Belt. Pluto can be polarizing. We either love Pluto people, or they turn us right off and we want to have nothing to do with them. Madonna has Pluto in her first house, those who are familiar with the singer Madonna from the 80s and early 90s. And I always found her to be one of the most polarizing celebrities. I couldn't understand why everybody liked her so much. Okay, her music was fine and everything, but as a person, I just found her completely off-putting. And that's my opinion, which I'm entitled to. You're entitled to yours. But she has Pluto in her first house. And people either loved her to bits, or they just were like, what the? No way. So Madonna is a perfect example of how polarizing, to my mind, a Plutonian type person can be. Pluto is a planet that decomposes. That's what death does. It sort of eats away at things, the maggots and the what have you, eating away at the flesh, decomposes things. Pluto also composts things. And what do we do when we compost something? We throw it on our plants, we throw it on our garden. And what happens then? The daffodils come up, the roses bloom brighter and stronger and with greater scent. Our decomposition, our composting of whatever's going on in our life gives a rebirth to fruiting and flourishing. That's Pluto energy. The phoenix bird is also associated with Pluto. What is the phoenix bird all about? The death. If you've watched Maleficent, the film Maleficent, very Plutonian character, Maleficent. What happens in the sequel to Maleficent? She, not to give the plot away, but she dies and is reborn as the phoenix bird. So very Plutonian imagery. Again, Pluto is the ancient god of great wealth, as well as the god of the underworld in mythology. So in our underworld times, when we go through the darkness, when we go through the shadow period of our life, the deep journey of the soul, then we often discover the hidden reserves of personal power in those times. We discover enlightenment in that dark night of the soul. We discover the resilience within which transforms us and enables us to emerge into our power, into our springtime, out of the darkness into the springtime. So this is what true wealth is. Yes, Pluto also has connections to physical wealth, to jewels and gold and things that come from within the earth and the wealth that it generates. Definitely has connections to that. But true wealth is found when we've gone through the dark night of the soul, our underworld experiences, our inner battle psychologically, and we've come out the other side. We've faced death, and death no longer has any fear for us because we've been into the darkness and we emerge into our power and our springtime. People with Pluto strong in their chart tend to go through times like that in life that transform them. And, they might start out in life with their power taken away from them through sickness or through abuse or difficulties or whatever. But when they go through the darkness and they emerge out the other side, they stand in their power, having overcome the sickness, the abuse, the darkness that their life has represented. Pluto strong people have a difficult course to chart in life, but a great personal power that they can generate that can serve them well once they emerge into their springtime and take their power back. Now, there is a shadow side to Pluto, if you haven't already gathered. What I've talked about is perhaps the more positive sides of Pluto that we can work with and utilize: personal power, great wealth, composting and rebirthing ourselves. These are actually positives that we can utilize in our life, transformation. But there is a very dark side to Pluto, naturally. Cruelty and abuse are associated with Pluto, and usually we find those exhibiting when we find Pluto in hard aspect with Mars, or occasionally with Saturn as well. Pluto expresses either as the giver of the abuse. So if you've got Pluto, let's say in a conjunction with Mars, for example, it's not always going to exhibit this way, but it can work out through that conjunction of Mars and Pluto, that we are the giver of abuse to others. We're abusive. But it can also work out that people with Pluto-Mars conjunction are also the recipients of the abuse in life. So if you have a Pluto-Mars conjunction, you might have experienced a lot of abuse in your life. And you need to be very consciously aware of not becoming the abuser who gives it out to others because you've suffered it. So cruelty and abuse are the shadow side that we see with Pluto energy. Pluto also is willpower. Now that can be positive if we're using our willpower to overcome our life's difficulties, but willpower that destroys things, ambition that stops at nothing, is the shadow side of Pluto energy. And many politicians and successful people have a strong Pluto in their chart because they have this ruthless ambition, this willpower that stops at nothing to dominate and control everything. That's the shadow. That's another shadow side of Pluto, and it's really heavy duty. Pluto strong people can be edge walkers. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it. Pluto resides on the edge of the solar system. Thus, he represents the edge of our conscious knowledge. risk takers in a very dark sense of the word, people who err on almost the evil side. They're willing to go to the edge and associate with nasty people and make deals with the devil and those sorts of things. Now, you can be an edge walker in positive Pluto energy as well, and this would look like somebody who enjoys extreme sports or someone who loves mystery and crime novels. My kids are actually very into this, to be honest. They love the sort of like the horror-y kind of scary films and that sort of thing. They love the sort of dark fairy tales and that kind of stuff. So that's things that get your adrenaline pumping, things that get you on the edge of your seat. That's what it means to be an edge walker, and that's the positive expression. If you've got Pluto strong in your chart and you want to counteract any sort of evil inclinations, then go and read lots of crimes and thrillers and horrors. Get into that stuff. Read up about serial killers and deep psychological understanding of the criminal mind, and research those things, because the more you get involved in the positive expression of Pluto energy, the less you're going to have a desire to go into the ruthless, evil, cruel, other shadow side that is Pluto energy. Now, I've talked a lot about the darkness of Pluto in this introduction, and I want to come back to what I talked about earlier now, which is what the New Horizons probe discovered when it flew past Pluto in 2015, and that was the heart, the beating heart on the side of Pluto. This is very much an as above, so below principle that we're seeing here. Pluto has a heart. He did have a heart in mythology. He fell passionately in love with Persephone. Okay, well, he was cruel and he, abducted her and what have you. But there is a heart there that feels things deeply. Plutonian people do feel very deeply, very intensely, very passionately. This heart on the side of Pluto should represent to us the passion that is available to us. We all have Pluto somewhere in the chart. We all have passions and desires in relation to something in our life. And it is okay to honor those things, heart-centered. And I want to just bring to light the awareness that often when we go through our shadow experiences, our darkness, our, the evil side of who we are, or we're in a state of melancholy and depression and deep struggle with life, we're in our underworld phase. Just know, if you're going through that at the moment, if you're experiencing fear or trauma of some sort, that you have the ability within you to regenerate and rebirth and come back with a strong heart that is capable of loving again, that is capable of experiencing and feeling once more good things in the sunshine and the springtime. Pluto has a heart. There is gold in the underworld experiences that you have, and there is a renewal in the underworld experiences that you go through, and we all go through them. There is also love at the core of what Pluto does in our life. Why? Because Pluto really does want to heal us, because he loves us. A couple of my girlfriends and I have had many discussions, my astrologically minded girlfriends have had many discussions about Pluto. A number of my highly intuitive girlfriends believe that Pluto is actually a feminine planet. Now, he was an ancient god of masculine quality, but there is also something deeply, passionately feminine, and Pluto rules a feminine sign, Scorpio. I'm not here to get into a debate about whether or not Pluto is a masculine or feminine planet or energy. That's something that you're welcome to do in the discussion comments section. But I do want people to keep in mind that Pluto has a heart, that there is a purpose to your underworld experiences. And if you see your difficult experiences in life as a chance to renew yourself and discover the gold and the strength within you, the power that is within you, then you will come out victorious. there is purpose to Pluto difficulties. That said, Pluto in karmic astrology is one of the most powerful planets. He is the planet of trauma and the trauma of our past lives. He represents that in the chart, where our traumas in past lives have come from. Plus, he also represents the antidote to our trauma, the healing of our trauma, the renewal of ourselves after our karmic darkness. So if you're interested in karmic astrology, then do come study with me at the Royal Stars Academy. We will be exploring Pluto karma in greater depth in the courses that I offer there. So just to briefly sum up with a few things that Pluto rules, like I said, succulents and cactus, dead things, festivals that have to do with death and rebirth. Pluto rules blowflies. Pluto rules toilets and plumbing. Pluto rules poisonous animals, abduction, obviously. Pluto rules cesspools. Pluto rules sex organs. Pluto rules the subconscious workings of the mind and the body. Pluto rules bombs. Pluto rules Godivas, catacombs, cemeteries. Pluto rules pests and pest control, plutonium, murder, monsters. Pluto rules psychology. Pluto rules sex, snakes, sorcerers. Pluto rules the subterranean realms of the earth. He rules taxation, terrorism, toilets, tombs. Pluto rules laser beams, kidnapping, marshes, massacres. Pluto rules masochism. Now, I need to just quantify that one or clarify that one. Pluto rules masochism in the sense of cruelty to others. That's the Plutonian side of masochism. Neptune also has associations with masochism in the sense that Neptune rules the self-debasement aspect of masochism. Okay, just to make clear that one. Anything morbid is ruled by Pluto. Anything black, which is why I'm wearing black for this series, is ruled by Pluto. Nuclear scientists are ruled by Pluto. Violence is ruled by Pluto. Wars, X-rays, victims, venom, vampires. Hope you got all those things down. There are a few things, and I hope that gives you some of the essence of this nuclear atomic planet that we are all living with in our charts these days. So let's move on now and see what Pluto represents for us when he transits certain houses in the horoscope. So how can we tell if we have Pluto transiting through our 8th house? Good question. Well, basically for the next 20 years on, from 2023 till 2043, those of us with Cancer rising are going to have Pluto transiting our 8th house. Why is that? Well, when we count from Cancer in whole sign astrology, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 signs away, there is Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. So all you've got to do to figure out if Pluto is transiting your 8th house, and say, you're watching this video in 20 years' time, as I hope you are, then you just need to work out what is your rising sign and count how many houses Pluto is away from your rising sign to determine which of these videos you should be watching. If you've got Pluto 8 houses from your rising sign, this is the video for you. So the themes of this particular transit for 20 years are intense experiences, but intense experiences that have relation to other people's money, to inheritances, and to death and rebirth scenarios. So that could be literal death and rebirth situations. Maybe you have a pet that dies and it causes you to, go deeply into your psychology and understand why you feel the way you do and all that sort of thing. Or maybe it could be metaphoric death and rebirth, ending of one way of doing life and completely brand new start in a different manner with how you're living your life. So metaphoric death and rebirth experiences could be part of these intense themes for the next 20 years. So your financial, not your financial situation, the financial situation of a significant other, like your spouse or a business partner, might go through a lot of changes over this particular 20-year period because they are intimately connected with you. And this is the house that relates to spouses, money and resources and income and stuff. So because they're connected to you, your partner, business partner, spouse, whatever, might be going through a lot of change and death and rebirth experiences with their financial situation as well. Your expenses, however, might increase, and it might prove challenging to know how to deal with expenses and that sort of thing over the coming years. So I don't want to scare anybody, but this axis, the second house, eighth house axis, is the axis of the coin, the money. So you might have expenses increase in your life because some sort of crisis arises, or because you have to transform your life completely. So yes, it might prove challenging to know how to deal with these things, but if you surround yourself with Pluto type people, powerful, intelligent people, and Pluto has a shadow and a light side, as we've explored. The shadow side is manipulative people, but the light side is people in positions of power. And so if you have powerful people who have a good knowledge of finance in your life, reach out to them and get advice and direction from them so you know how to deal with your expenses and your financial situations. If they fluctuate, if there's sort of those death and rebirth kind of experiences with finances. In the positive, if Pluto connects with any natal planet, so if you've got any planets in this 8th house, it can bring an influx of financial support from other people in your life. Let's say you have the moon in the 8th house. Well, when Pluto makes a connection with the moon in the 8th house, it could be that your mother or a maternal figure, a grandmother, might come in and sort of offer you an inheritance or offer you some sort of financial or material or moral support in some way that can change your life and benefit your life. So Pluto can be very beneficial in the 8th house when it comes to that sort of thing. If you had Mercury in the 8th house, it might be a friend that steps in with some sort of financial, material, moral support of some description, and so on. Jupiter, it could be an inspirational figure or a guru who has your back, who steps in to sort of bless you and be a benevolent force. So it depends what planet you have in the 8th house, but any conjunctions with Pluto and another planet in the 8th house can bring a lot of blessing into your life, your life financially. But we should expect huge transformations. This is likely to be our greatest growth and transformational period in our entire life, the next 20 years, guys. So don't go into this thinking I'm just going to keep on doing the same old and everything will be fine. No, go in saying, okay, I'm open, I'm willing, I'm flexible. Do what you need to do, universe, to take me to that higher place, to take me to that transformed energy that you want me to be. So expect that there's going to be changes. Be flexible, be open to that, and you will cope so much better. We become very embedded now in our spiritual evolution. We want to evolve, where we might have resisted it for certain reasons in the past. When we have the transit of Pluto through the 8th house, we want the change. We embrace the change. We're hungry for it because we want to step up that ladder of enlightenment. We want to open up our consciousness to greater things. So we become very immersed and very interested in spiritual practices under this energy. Now, if we are high vibrational as a human being, we allow ourselves to become vulnerable now and to surrender to where life wants to take us. And we let go of any attachments that are holding us back, any old attitudes, any old beliefs, any old must be this way or not at all kind of, stuckness. We let go of that now so that we can move forward. Obviously, if we are a low vibrational person and we resist this, Pluto comes in like the wrecking ball into our life and can really turn things upside down. So the more you make yourself vulnerable to the universe and allow, surrender yourself to the universe and what it wants to do to you, the better off you're going to be. If you resist, Pluto will have his way, usually with the hard taskmaster approach. So it's the end of an era for certain personal values as well. Why is that? Because the house of our personal values is here, the second house, and this is the house opposite. And so it's very much connected to leaving behind certain personal values that you thought you needed in life to get by, and you realize, you transform your life, you transform your opinion about certain values, and you realize, they weren't serving me, those values. I have to set myself free. So it can be very liberating, this transit, which is one of the reasons why Uranus does very well in the 8th house generally, because the 8th house has to do with liberation. usually through a crisis, usually through some sort of upheaval, but liberation nonetheless. So I love that. You know, people deride the 8th house a lot because, oh, it's a difficult house, it's a malefic house, but it actually can bring so much freedom and blessing if we work with it in the right way. So you can expect during this time to have many mystical, psychic, or supernatural experiences, and this will lead you to like a deep interest in the occult or astrology or metaphysics. You might see a lot of omens, a lot of synchronistic events sort of lining up that change your life, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. The universe is so interconnected. I want to know more about these energies and how they work out, and da-da-da-da. And you can go down that road of getting involved in the mystical, the magical, the spiritual. We can gain a lot of clarity of mind when Pluto moves through the 8th house. Things sort of make sense now. We can see see what the real reason is. We usually through a deep dive, actually. And we look at, okay, well, what's the root cause here? Why is this happening? Why is this going on the way it is? And when we do that, we understand the core motivations for things become clearer. So we let go also during this time of anything that has been imposed on us against our will. You know, if you've been forced into a certain job, if you've been forced to marry a certain person, if you've been, obligated to take on a certain role in life, or whatever it looks like, this is a time when you break free from that. You leave behind anything that is forced upon you against your will, and you step into your own willpower, take your power back during this time. And this will be very strong in the early part of this transit, and also at the latter part of the transit when Pluto's in the final degrees as well. Pluto generally does well in the 8th house, especially if you've got that natally. However, there might still be some times of stress and struggle, particularly, like I've already alluded to, if we resist the changes that are wanting to come in, and we want to cling to our old worn-out habits, Pluto will kick us in the butt. So really, I just keep reiterating, be flexible, be open, be vulnerable, surrender, and you will cope so much better. But one thing that we are interested in during this transit is that we're committed to digging out old karmic patterns and disposing on them. It's like there's the house of surgery, but in what I'm talking about here, psychological surgery needs to be done. So, we assess, okay, what's holding me back? Why am I not succeeding? Where is it going wrong? And we just get rid of the old BS that's not helping us grow. We become more concerned with growth rather than comfort. This is definitely not a house of comfort. So comfort does not serve us well now. We need to get uncomfortable and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to, again, it's part of being vulnerable. It's part of surrendering. We need to see the value in growing as a soul, incarnate and increasing our consciousness rather than staying in the same old rut. And now we can become quite objective about, where we have been too controlling, too manipulative, and tried to dominate other people. And we kind of see that for what it is. Like, where have we stuffed up? Where have we not been in integrity? And it can be a powerful time when we change those behaviors. So part of the purification process, Pluto wants to purify our shadow side oftentimes. So there's this regeneration energy that Pluto carries. It's second to none. And so what's really happening is we are breaking ourselves down from our misdemeanors, let's say, or our shadow side, like the phoenix sort of dissolving into ashes, and then we rise up out of the ashes transformed. So very regenerative, this energy. We're hungry for answers to the mysteries of our life. We want to know, we want it to make sense, we want to understand about death, reincarnation, immortality, and so we do deep dives into those things. We might go do ayahuasca now, or we might research, how different cultures around the world have dealt with death and what their ideas about death are, and so on. We get very interested. Hungry for answers. We can also be quite hungry or interested in sexual experimentation while Pluto moves here. This is a house of sex, and Pluto is a planet that's highly sexualized. So we when we have Pluto for 20 years, how fantastic, transit through this house, we experience more sexual passion and intensity than we ever have before. So our sexual experiences go from this level to this level, like way up there. We feel so connected to our partners. Orgasm can bring us to intensely powerful spiritual experiences, connection to God, deeper understanding, deeper uniting with our partner. It is awesome. And I'll just say, for anyone who's got Pluto in the 8th house, natally, this is often the case for people with Pluto in the 8th house by natal position. Lucky me. So it's a great position like this because your intimate experiences are, just the catalysts for the soul to transform, to grow, to be transformed through sex. So your sex life will be transformed during the next 20 years, and you will be transformed because of your sex life during the next 20 years. It's a fantastic position. It really, really is. We can really get in touch with our emotions now like never before, but also with our ambitions and our hunger for power, our desire for power. So very, very beautiful, powerful placement in that sense. Any criticism though, any disapproval from other people, and we are highly sensitized to it. We're like, ooh, it hurts. And often when we have this by transit or by natal position, we feel it so keenly that we can react and recoil. I'm not having anything to do with that person. They've hurt me. Stepping back, but it will always be a catalyst. Pluto is a very catalytic, I suppose is the word, type of planet, and we will want to perfect ourselves and find our the true self within. When people are disapproving or critical or what have you, it does cause us to go deep within and look within. Okay, well, how can I improve? How can I better myself? How can I transform myself? So there is benefit here, even though we're highly sensitized. And oftentimes Pluto in the 8th house can lead us by transit or natal position to finding our true life path, our purpose, our mission, our meaning in life. But it's only often through deep searching, deep looking for answers that we find it, the hidden treasure down in the underworld, so to speak. So you may find that over the next 20 years, my beautiful friends, that you find your meaning, you find your purpose, you find your truth, but it's often going to come with a bit of a crisis or a bit of upheaval or a death and rebirth metaphoric experience. So it is a super significant transit, this one, and a karmic period of change, renewal, and rebirthing. So by the end of this 20-year transit, you are going to be a completely different person on a completely different trajectory, living a completely different life. So be open-armed to that. Embrace it. Be willing, because it can bring you to a place of greater joy once you've gone through the underworld. So what are the keys to working with this particular transit? Well, don't resist the changes that want to come in now. Be open-armed, like I've just said. Free your heart, free your mind to enjoy the experiences that come your way. And this includes especially the sexual experiences you encounter, because they can lift you up. Like we're talking tantra, we're talking, every time you have orgasm, you just want to pray with your partner because you feel so connected to the divine that it takes you higher. So, call it Kundalini energy, whatever. But the more that you can free your heart and mind to enter into sexual ecstasy, you will certainly uplift the soul and up-level the soul. Jump, all feed in. Jump into psychological or astrological exploration or examination of yourself, your selfhood. Know thyself, as Plato said. This is really key for 8th house Pluto transits. So whatever it takes, explore Carl Jung, do an astrology course with me to help understand yourself better. Get involved in exploration of the self, whatever mechanism you need to do that with. It could be through therapy, it could be art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, whatever. I would also encourage you to embrace any supernatural experiences, any synchronistic experiences that manifest in your life as well. Open your heart to the occult, open your heart to metaphysical studies, because all of these things are going to just expand your mind, expand your world, and expand your heart and transform your life, which is the whole purpose of Pluto's transit through the 8th house. I would also encourage you, because this can be a healing house, it's a water house, so yes, I would encourage you to experiment with alternative and mystical practices and healing mechanisms. So this could be past life regression work, acupuncture. It could look like different sorts of psychological healings. Be open to those things, because Pluto wants to utilize those things and can utilize those things to transform you. And if we are doing the work to transform ourselves, Pluto's going to do it for us. And I tell you right now, I would rather do the work myself than leave it up to him, because his methods are usually to pull the rug out from under us, to destroy us, to bring us crashing down, so that we have to rebuild and regenerate ourselves. If we are doing the work, going regularly to dance therapy classes, doing art therapy, journaling, reading spiritual books, jumping into mystical practices, doing ayahuasca, past life regression, psychology, astrology, if we are doing that work, Pluto has less need to pull the rug out from under us, and we cope so much better. So my darling friends, this is my advice, take it or leave it, for the next 20 years of this transit. May it transform you, change your life, and bring you to a place of greater self-awareness and empowerment, taking your power back. Thanks for joining me for this video. Do jump in next week when I talk about Pluto's transit through the 9th house. I'll catch you then.